All right, there we go. So it's lovely to meet you as introduced. I'm Nick, and I've been in this job for 6 months. Speaking of complexity, Accenture is a very complicated place. It's a small nation state, so I'm still figuring out. But what I'm going to talk to you today is, as mentioned, deep simplicity. Now, it's important that these are two words. Simplicity we all know about. The deep thing is also very important. You know, I read about the sort of theme of this conference, the hug the system. The deep bit is about hugging the system. The deep bit's about understanding complexity, because you can't come up with a simple solution without understanding it. So it's very important that these two words are together. I'm not talking about just simplicity, and I'm not talking just about having deep knowledge. Accenture Song has put this sort of statement out in the world as something that we believe in, right? Which is this idea of growth through relevance. There are lots of parts of Accenture that are about optimizing and about scaling and doing all sorts of really important things for our clients. But growth is, by definition, I think, a creative act, right? And so if song is a creative part of Accenture, then we really think a lot about growth. And also because we're creative and we understand humans and we have empathy, we do that because we're relevant. And in fact, growth doesn't come unless you're relevant, right? So this is a really important sort of thought. And if you unpack it, I think what the theme of this presentation, and maybe even the whole this whole conference, is really about, you know, the changes that have become sort of incredibly fast, and it's difficult to keep up. So if relevance is important, then keeping up with that relevance has become even more important, because relevance changes. One of the things that you may have read, if you're on the Accenture website, which I know you're all going to do on the weekend, and lock yourself in the bathroom and go through the Accenture website. But we talk a lot about this thing called life centricity. But I want to unpack what we mean by life centricity, and I'm going to ground it in, as a creative person, in the mediums that we use, right? Which is software and technology. That's the medium. Like, the stuff that we do lives in the world in those mediums. And the thing that has affected that medium, right, and that loop between culture and technology, and then technology creating culture and culture creating technology, there's this sort of loop between these things. And as we all know, the thing that has changed everything and has caused this sort of exponential change is the internet, right? So when I think about life centricity and I think about our customers, or the end customer, I think about their relationship with the medium, and I think about how the internet has changed that relationship. So, we talk about product, centricity as a way to look at business. If you build it, they will come. And this is true that this has been very effective, especially if you've got good R&D and good design and you make great products, and you build a market through product centricity, right? Now, the thing about being product-centric, though, is that it's particularly relevant before the internet. So before the internet, we didn't have a lot of knowledge about how our customers were making decisions about how to buy stuff, how they were using our products. And so it made sense that what the most relevant thing before the internet was product centricity. Customer centricity is not at the expense of the product. It's like understanding the relationship between the product and the customer. And the thing that changed with the internet is, all of a sudden we have this ability to see how the customer is not only deciding how to buy something, because we're seeing them through the internet and, with this life cycle marketing idea, but we're also seeing in many cases how they're using the product, because almost every product now has some sort of service layer, some sort of software. So it makes sense and it's relevant, right, to be customer-centric when you've got the internet. Well, what I'm going to talk about is where the internet has come. This is sort of maturing of this thing. It's still very young, but it's become such a complete part of our lives. And in fact, I think the sort of insight in life centricity is it's very difficult to separate us buying products and services and using products and services from everything else that's connected with that. Maybe 10% of the things that we do through an interface is about buying and using a product. The other 90% is about everything else. And in fact, the last dominoes of things that weren't connected were connected during the pandemic. So the tiny little part of your life that's analog, got completely enmeshed in the internet during the during the pandemic. So to understand the customer's relationship with products and services, you have to understand how to make great product. You have to understand how the customer relates to that product. But you also have to understand that they're relating to that product in the middle of this crazy, chaotic, connected world that we live. Most of the interactions I have in my life right now are through some sort of screen or some sort of interface, whether it's banking, or connecting with friends, or traveling, or transacting, my health life, my political life, my social life. All of these things are connected. And they're connected in a way where they're jammed together. So I could be scrolling through my feed, reading about the Russians invading Ukraine, and I see an ad for a bag, a nice backpack. And so I look at that and I think, I'm traveling next week with my mum. So I text my mum and say, I've seen this bag, I think it's really good. What's the weather going to be like? And she goes back, well, why don't you look on weather? And, and I go on through, and I buy the bag. About all of this stuff, and then go back to reading about the invasion of the Ukraine, right? This is our lives right now. And it's also part of what we talk about with the human paradox. These things are stitched together in such a strange way compared to our analog's lives, that you can't think about products and services without understanding that you're just a node in this complexity when you're trying to sell something, right? And it sort of led to what I call the complexity tax. So the reason deep simplicity is so important is because our lives have accreted complexity since the beginning of the internet, which is sort of ironic, because the internet was supposed to promise for us to have control over things. It was supposed to give us the ability for us to understand and use things better. But in many cases, it's done the opposite because of this sort of accretion of complexity that's over time. And it's complexity that is connected both to quantity, right? So by its nature, a network will grow exponentially. And so all the things on the internet have had this sort of incredible growth. And there are now this, the internet promises to give us use of our time, but at the same time giving us things that we can never consume. And I think the best metaphor for this, or it's not a metaphor, it's a real thing, is the infinite scroll, which was a marvelous invention, an invention that will remind us constantly that we can never consume everything. And I don't know about you, but I'm probably not the only person who, when I'm in an infinite scroll, have this sort of deep sense of anxiety that I'm never going to be able to consume everything, and I'm never going to tear myself away to this thing. It's a problem of quantity also because the formats keep changing. It's not just the stuff on the internet. It's like if you think about your relationship with an app like Facebook, if you're as old as me and you remember when Facebook first came out, the first version of Facebook was text. It was text-based, right? And then the pipe got big enough that photos became the language of Facebook, right? And basically they destroyed Flickr because everyone put their photos into Facebook. And then after that, the language of the internet, because the pipe got bigger again, became video. And so now your scrolling experience on Facebook is really a video experience. But the important thing to note is none of these things replace the other. It's not like when a new format comes along, we're like, well, we're going to bring in photos now, so let's take away all the text. No, it goes on top, on top, on top. And this is going to be true also of this new Web3 series of technologies. If I have access to a spatial computing, it doesn't mean I'm still not going to be going to a hyperlinked page. It doesn't mean that I still aren't listening to audio. So the quantity is also about just a proliferation and layering of different formats. And if we think that there's a lot of content now, in the last 6 months, we've seen the ability for people to create images and worlds instantly by typing in some stuff. So this partnership between AI and human imagination, which these applications like Wall-E have, mean that we'll be able to create more content than we can possibly consume, right? Because the gap between thinking about making something and actually making something has collapsed into a little entry field, right? There's also an issue of quality. So it's not just quantity, it's quality. There's a lot of places out in the internet that you rely on for information where their business model is not about giving you information. In fact, their business model is about, the only reason they want you on their page is so they can sell advertising, right? And so that has made it more difficult actually for some of these platforms to actually deliver on the thing that they're supposed to do because they're supporting an ad model that is sometimes contrary to that. And there's also it's just a lot of shit out there. There's more things to be designed right now than there are good designers. It's just, I for years and years I've been going out to Fire Island, which is this strip of sand off of Long Island just outside of New York. And I'd go and get a ferry there, and I'd buy a paper ticket, and I'd walk on the ferry. But of course, because everything now is a part of the app economy, I now have an app to get the ticket. So I have to download the app, I have to upload all of my payment information, and then I get on. And it's just so poorly designed. It's really badly designed. I think it was designed by the ferry captain's cousin. It must have been. Again, there are more things to design than there are good designers. So there's this question of too much stuff and a lot of stuff that is not well designed, and in many cases is not interoperable. I went back to Australia in April, and I had to download 5 apps. I had to download 5 apps. There was an airline app, there was a coronavirus app, there was a TSA app, there was an Australian government app. Each of these apps, I had to put in the same fucking information for my 4 members of my family. Passport, age, over and over again. And the thing is, none of them talked to each other. And by the way, none of them worked. Because in the end, I had to get into a line anyway and see a human. And I'm flying across a big blank Pacific, right? I'm coming into Sydney, and I've already exhausted myself from uploading all this stuff and none of this stuff working and speaking to each other. And the steward comes around and hands me a paper thing saying, this is the arrival form. Oh, so I have to write it down now. Again, layering of formats. All right, so we're in the middle of this sort of chaos, this accretion of complexity, this complexity tax. And what I'm going to suggest is that we need to clarify this with deep simplicity, but there's a particular place that we need to clarify this, right? And the thing is that place is interesting, right? Because it's the opposite to the shape of our industry. And when I say our industry, I mean marketing and design, right? The shape of our industry was not designed to solve for simplifying the middle. It was designed by 2 cultures, basically. And you're probably going to recognize some of the stuff that David was talking about earlier, right? So in the advertising industry, we have a world where at the top, we've got a bunch of advertising creatives that are really good at telling stories. And they've got really good craft. They have good filmic craft. They've got good craft. But they don't really understand technology and media because the industry separated media from creative in their late 80s. And the creatives still think through this sort of prism, mostly of broadcast. So they're really good, have got great craft, but don't understand media and technology. And then on the bottom, we have this emergent tribe of performance, right, where they understand the media and technology, but they don't understand brand, and they don't have particularly good craft, right? And in a way, the reason that the middle has been vacated is these 2 tribes are like oil and water. You've got the people at the top looking down at the performance people saying, they're so mechanical, they don't understand humans, they have no craft. And the people at the bottom are looking up at the advertising creatives and saying, these people don't understand media. They have no mastery over the mediums that people are living in right now. And the problem is they're both right. They're both right? And the truth is that it's not enough to just do stuff to make people feel something and do stuff to make them act. Because both of those things are contingent on them understanding, right? And this is where I'm getting to. We've got these 2 tribes that have vacated the middle that is the most important, which is why? Why should I feel about this brand? Why should I buy this thing? The middle is the important piece. And for some strange quirk of the cultures of our industry, we've vacated the middle. We've surrendered the middle. And it's sort of interesting because this is sort of like the funnel, right? This is like the classic funnel, the middle. But I don't think that it's just about consideration in the middle. I think, awareness and transaction, whatever. But the middle is about understanding. In this crazy complexity, what we need is understanding. And the thing that helps you understand is simplicity, because simplicity gives weight to your options, right? It's a decision, right? Now, what's interesting also about this is that actually some of the best brands have sort of known this for a while, and some of them have forgotten it, right? If you think about, I worked at Apple, and my memory of Apple and the way that that brand has been built for me is not by some big metaphorical ad, right? And in fact, Apple, as far as I know, has only done one brand campaign, and that was Think Different. And the reason Steve Jobs did that campaign was because he came back to Apple, and the products were shit. They were beige boxes that crashed. And so until he could get a good product into the market, he had to tread water a little bit and say, this is what we stand for. And then the iMac came out, and then everything changed. Apple did not grow while they were running Think Different. They were positioning themselves. It grew when the iMac came out. And I don't know if you remember the advertising and the product itself, but it was very simple. And ever since then, every ad that Apple has done has been a product ad. It hasn't been a brand ad. It wasn't. And so you understand what the product is, so you feel something for this. They've built a brand from the middle out. There's an app for that. Say you want to get a fish taco. That's an app for that. Say you want to go fish. That was an amazing ad. It looked to me a lot like a mid-funnel ad, but it was in broadcast, right? And so my whole point here is that this fulcrum in the middle makes people understand and makes them act, right? And so, but here's where it gets complicated. If the industry is shaped like that, this is how customers are behaving, right? How many times have you gone onto YouTube when you wanted to buy a vacuum cleaner and typed in, give me a Electrolux Anthem ad? I don't. Or go straight to the buy flow in Electrolux website and go straight and buy something. No, you want to understand. And then when I understand, I'll feel something. You're more likely to go in and type in, what's the difference between an Electrolux and a Dyson? And where's that happening? It's not happening because we're doing that work. It's happening because the internet and the chaos of the internet is where you figure that out. You're going to social to do search. You're going to YouTube to get product demonstrations. You're going to third-party review sites, and you're figuring it out. And then when you get around to it, and then you'll do it. And I knew that at Apple, because I was running Apple.com, I saw this. Research was happening off and on the site, and they were buying off and on the site. It was all connected. It was all connected, right? But we have designed an industry which is exactly the opposite shape to how people are behaving. We need to fill in the middle again, right? And if we fill in the middle, it'll make people feel more and act more. And there is an analogous shape here for design too, where you've got design thinking at the top and big tech implementations down the bottom. And in the middle is where the action is as a designer. That's when you figure out the interface, where you create the simplicity so people can make decisions in an interface to get shit done, right? It's where the action is. Okay, so we need to fix this middle, and I'm going to talk about a process and the people that can help. So I'm going to get very concrete, right? Because I'm not very educated. I was raised by wolves. I'm not academic. And so I'm going to get very practical here, right? There's a process from deep simplicity, and I first started to think about this back in 2005, right? In 2005, I started to see this pattern keep coming up, which I call the complexity curve, right? And it started in 2005 when I worked on this project called Nike Plus, and I had this team at RGA and on the client side at Nike that had this incredible set of skill sets. We had great systematic designers, great strategists, great running category experts, great visual designers. We had all these people, right? And we had this piece of hardware, right, which was a puck that you put in your shoe that spoke to a sensor that you plugged into your Nano, right? It's amazing technology that could track your running, right? So how do we display this so that a consumer can actually use this product, right? The interface is actually what people are going to use. This was a sort of delivery system, right? And what was interesting about it is that this amazing team of experts asked so many questions, see so many connections, had such deep understanding of the problem that they enjoyed understanding that problem so much that they transferred the complexity in some of the designs to the user. So we had multiple designs. We were spinning up designs. I could give you a coffee table book full of all the options that we did. But I remember we reached this point where this interface was so perfectly complicated, but none of the team could see it. because they were experts and they thought they had solved every problem that needed to be solved. I don't have an image of that interface, so I was looking on the web for something that would sort of remind me of what it looked like, and it looked something like this. So this is a week's worth of running, and you could go into the excruciating detail of every gate, everything you did, right? And again, how we got there was and so this is the complexity curve. We've got on one axis the time it takes to do something, from the beginning of a project to the end of a project. On the other axis going up, we've got the amount of knowledge that you have about the problem, which expresses itself in complexity, right? And that interface that I just showed you is a result of this. It's a result of really smart people asking all the right questions and seeing all the connections to get into a place of complete knowledge which expresses itself in complexity, and then transferring that complexity into the interface and therefore to the user. Now, and what we needed to do, and which we ended up doing, was that, okay, we're going to stop asking questions and seeing connections and then start making decisions and sacrificing some of those things. And the reason I call this deep simplicity is because you can't get to the right question unless you go through the complexity. That's when you know what to sacrifice, right? And so we ended up, and so again, the deep bit is as important as the simple piece. The other version of this would be a shallow bell curve, which I would call superficial simplicity. And there's a lot of work that agencies do, which I think is superficial simplicity. My favorite is when you're working at an advertising agency, is when a planner comes across a tweet and then uses that tweet to describe a zeitgeist for a whole industry. One tweet that they found randomly when they were on the toilet, right? That's shallow simplicity, right? Deep simplicity is understanding the complexity, right? But then turning it into something simple. In the end, and this was, by the way, this was before the iPhone. So this is what a period piece this is, right? So this was the final design. It was a desktop app. It suffers from the skeuomorphism of Apple at the time, very shiny. But this is, compare this with the last thing I showed. Now, and it's not even that precise. Each run is represented by a round lozenge. It's not precise. If it was precise, but it's branded and it's beautiful. It's gestural. You understand it. You see it out the corner of your eye. That's Nike. I get it. They're cool. And then if you want some complexity, there's a hover state where you get more metrics of your run. So this to me is a sort of, at the time, a good expression of deep simplicity, right? So we're talking about all these interesting people. Tell me something about those people. How are we going for time here, by the way? I'm good. I'm plenty of time. Have a cigarette. It's fine. So if I go back further than 2005, and I go back to like 2002, when I was starting to develop a framework for RGA. RGA was an agency that had great designers, great systematic thinkers, great technologists, but we also started to hire great storytellers because the web became the most important storytelling medium. And we were very honest about our relationship with that medium. And so we changed when the medium changed. So we brought in all of these great storytellers. And what I'm about to tell you is both true for the individual, but it's also true for the organization. So see this brain as a brain in a creative person's head, but also it's a brain that represents an organization, right? So I decided, we've got to start thinking about the two core creative capabilities as stories and systems, right? Another way to think systems is really design, right? I use systems as an example because I like alliteration, S&S, right? But really what it means is that systematic thinkers are really good at seeing the relationship between things, enabling behaviors by designing, software and stuff. And it's a different way of thinking. It's architectural, right? And it's understanding these patterns and stuff. Storytelling is about telling a story, a very simple story. It's about the revealed moment. It's about this sort of thing. And what I found was that creatives tended to be one or the other. They tended to be one or the other. And so I needed to create a organizing principle that respected these two things. Now, later on, I actually did a bit of reading about the brain, and it confirmed some of this, right? Because the truth is that the brain, the left hemisphere of the brain, isn't rational and right creative. That's a received wisdom right now. But if you do something creative and both hemispheres of your brain light up. a more sort of primal way of looking at the hemispheres, and we don't know a lot about the brain, but what we do know is that the left-hand side of the brain processes things one at a time, and the right-hand side of the brain processes things all at once. So one is a temporal processing unit, and the other one is a spatial processing unit. It maps pretty neatly against these two creative sensibilities I'm talking about. So there's some sort of truth there. Now, the important thing about this construct is to recognize that there is this thing that connects these two hemispheres called a corpus callosum. It's a mess of white fibers that connect. I could pick up that brain and pull it apart, but it would still be connected by the corpus callosum. That's where the action is. That's where shit happens. It's not in the hemispheres, it's in the lateralizing. It's where these things are going back and forth, back and forth. And we know how important that corpus callosum is in the connection between these two things, because there was a time when, to stop epileptic fits, the doctors had a great idea of severing the corpus callosum. They don't do it anymore, but it worked. It stopped epileptic fits. But it also gave you the ability to see what happens when just one side of the brain is processing, the other one isn't. So if I cover this side of my eye, if this side of my, and so that speaks to that side of the brain. If I cover, and I put a pencil up in front of me, my left-hand hemisphere knows what the pencil's for, but doesn't know what it's called. If I did the opposite, and I put the pencil up, the right-hand side. No, I'm getting this all mixed up. The left-hand side knows what it's called, but not how to use it, right? And so both hemispheres are doing their function, but they're pretty useless without each other. And so this is my thing. This is my whole thesis right now. The action's in the middle. If your company just does one or the other, or preferences one or the other, your company's brain damaged. That's really the bottom line. You need both of these ways of thinking. We live in time and space, and we need to be creative in time and space. And it requires these different teams, right? And so this was a sort of premise for how I built the teams to pay off on that complexity curve, to go from benefiting great systematic thinking and great storytelling. By definition, systematic thinking is additive because you're always seeing the connection. And by definition, narrative thinking is subtractive because you're dealing with the revealed moment. It can only ever be one thing at a time, right? And so that is a good way to sort of express deep simplicity too. We need both. We need both hemispheres of the brain, right? And we need an industry that thinks about the middle more than the edges. Let's not vacate the middle because we want to be with our tribe. I want to be with all my designers. I want to be with all my advertising wankers. No, we want to be there in the middle. We've got to be connected. And this is the way to get to deep simplicity. Thank you.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you very much, man.
Thank you.
I think we've got time. I'm just going to hear in my ear. Have we got time for a couple of questions? If there are any in the audience. Otherwise, I've got some. Do we have time?
Have you ever seen someone finish early?
No.
I've been at
Oh, no, don't worry. You didn't finish early.
I didn't?
No, you didn't finish early. But I'm just sick.
I thought you were opening up a long chat. No?
No, but we are. We're chatting later on at 4 o'clock at Gaga later today. But is there a question already in the room? Otherwise, I've got one to kick off. Guys, come on. Don't be scared. We're very friendly people up here. You have a question. Where are you? I can't see who that is. Should I run back to you with a microphone? Or can you... What? Have we got a mic? Okay, let me grab a mic. Super. Okay, there you are. This is going to get exhausting. You could have got up and come close to me, but no, she's just like, yeah, let's just come on.
Oh, okay.
Sure. Why don't you stand up?
Oh, right.
Okay.
So Nick, thanks for this. It's very inspiring.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can, yeah.
I'm out of breath now. You did the run. So my question is, you said brand people are on the top and data tech people are on the bottom.
Yeah.
So who's in the middle? Who's doing the understanding? Is it both of them together? Or is there a new capability we need to close the gap?
It's both, combined in a way that makes both better, right? And so this is an important point, right? Because if we don't do this, then the top gets further and further away from the consumer because they don't understand where consumers, they don't understand the context of modern media and how quickly it's changing. And the people at the bottom, it's an efficiency play. So performance marketing right now is an efficiency play, and efficiency plays always run out of ground. There's only so many times you can chase someone around the web. And there's also a sacrifice you make when you chase someone around the web, and you're only measuring the 0.5% of clicks when the 95.5% of people are just exhausted at seeing you. They're not measuring the fact that you're degrading the brand by stuffing up their feed. And so we need to dignify the top with an understanding of what the product is, and the bottom with a bit of craft and understanding and artfulness, right? And so you need to bring these two worlds together. This was what I tried to do at RGA, right? Was that the world of design and storytelling was up until then pretty separate. And the only way that I could make it work was not through the economy of good intentions. It wasn't just, oh, you guys should work together. I had to structure teams so that they worked like that. And so that's why this is a design problem. We need to design the industry so that these two things come together. Now, there's also a version of the middle, which in design, which is about the actual act of creative technology, visual design, experience design, and copywriting, sitting in a room and having a conversation and making stuff, right? And the problem with a world that only thinks about brand and only thinks about technology is you start separating these creative capabilities, and it becomes a mechanical process, and you design poor experiences. So they're sort of related, but in both cases, the middle is where the action is. That's the point. And the way to get the middle is to take the people from the top, people from the bottom, put them in the middle, and get them really drunk. And they'll go out, and then they'll start to like each other.
Let's go to the middle, everyone.
Hey!
Okay, man. Well, we'll see each other at 4 o'clock.